one of the purposes of this call, which I think is so valuable, is that a lot of us that are in like tech, even if we've been building technology companies for a couple of companies, your brain is like brainwashed. Is like in the same way all of us send our kids to college, even though we're smart and we're like, I'm not really sure college is worth it. We still send them to college. And I think it's the same way when you're, especially when you're in the tech world building new technology, you kind of think, oh, like all of a sudden your mouth is saying angels and friends and family and pre-seed, seed, series A, blah, 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 blah. And we never spend enough time thinking about these other ways that you could raise capital. And there's a lot of really interesting things that you said, Alan, which I'll leave the licensing stuff out because there's a session, Coffee and Cash in the Vault, specifically about licensing, where you definitely have deep expertise, and I would encourage everybody to go check that out. But what's interesting about revenue-based financing is that even in the way that I was thinking about it is that I was thinking about Amar, right, and several other people who have done equity crowdfunding things, right, and there's other entrepreneurs inside the network that have tried to do that. Well, the hardest part about equity crowdfunding, or if you're going to go do Kickstarter, is you need enough money on the front end to get it set up, and then you have to have like a marketing budget that if you're driving people in, that capital most of it will go into the bucket of funding, but some of it gets reinvested into marketing. The problem is it's hard to get the flywheel going, right? And I was just thinking about the fact that an investor, presentation could be a revenue-based financing where you're basically telling them, you give me the small amount of money so I can get the flywheel going. And not only will I have to budget in the early days to pay you back, but also, it'll get me going. And that's a great way for jumping things forward. Another use case that is actually an option, something that I've been trying to think through is there's some technology inside of the EPX platform. I'm going to show you something where there's some real interest in popping it out into its own company. And the way that thing might be sold to start with is services, right? So if I were a tech company and I went to an investor today and I said, hey, we want to raise some capital, and I've got services for a little while you give me the money to build this thing, they may or may not dig that, right? I mean, because they're looking at the risk of the technology. But if I say, hey, give me the money, forget about what I'm doing with it, we've got services that are turning on, revenue tomorrow, all of a sudden, that is a way for me to use the revenue of the full picture of the company, even though it's services, to pay this investor back out of the top line while I just raised capital with no equity given up for the tech company. So there's some really cool things that are like, going through my head, I think, and that's the value of these calls, is like to kind of, think through some other use cases.